I just walked over there and looked.
I'm being told to get ready. I take that with a grain of salt.
Well, yeah, they're doing it now.
Yeah.
They're just telling you to be ready.
Yeah.
Shut up.
I don't know if she'll come out from this way though.
Yeah.
Honestly, guys, I'm hoping she'll go down the other way.
Yeah.
Me too.
Like, just
I
go.
don't know what I'm talking about. I really.
Oh, you're here for this. Yeah.
I really just want to go.
Yeah. Just go out that way.
Yeah,
I mean, either way, I still got to do live stuff at 4 and 5.
I think she still has to get like booked and stuff though. So even after like the actual plea, like it's still gonna be a minute.
Do they take fingerprints and all that stuff?
I think so. I think it happens inside.
Well, y'all got me up. I was asleep and now my knees.
I'm gonna pay for it when I order y'all.
Oh yeah, this.
From football. From Friday night football. I mean. From
Oh yeah.
Kneeling.
I just wonder if they're telling me to be prepared with Amelia coming down.
I used to shoot a lot
Like,
of that.
hopefully
Well,
I wouldn't miss anything.
Chris Russell's also in the front, so she can get in front of that camera. If worst comes to
I have to
worst.
shoot LSU this Saturday,
Oh, be ready.
and I don't have a knee pad. I've been looking for one.
Well, they big deal on the sideline?
You have to kneel because the student end zone's so low. You have to
And
kneel.
then I kneel so much that like when I shoot Saints now I kneel.
And you think,
because
like-
it cleans the background up.
And you think like, oh, it's on grass at LSU. It's not too
Oh,
bad.
it hurts like that.
Contemplating it. That means spending like 15 extra more dollars on a smoothie.
Now that you mentioned smoothie, I will get one between now and.
We interrupt with breaking news from WWL Louisiana.
Well, that breaking news, New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell has pled not guilty in the federal case against her. Today's arraignment comes after an indictment last month. WWL Louisiana Chief Investigator David Hammer and reporter Amelia Strahan, they have been following Cantrell's case very closely, both of them at the courthouse right now. But we want to begin with investigator Mike Pearlstein joining me on set right now. We said that this was a historic indictment, the first sitting mayor in the city's 300-year history to be indicted for federal charges.
And now the case begins with this first appearance and arraignment. The charges against her laid out and her plea of not guilty. Not only is that expected, that's the only plea you can enter on a first appearance in front of a magistrate judge. What was interesting were the bond conditions. She's free on a signature bond, her own recognizance, also as expected. Maybe not so expected is that they have restricted her travel and are forcing her to surrender her passport. That is quite significant given the duties as a mayor could involve foreign travel outside of the United States. We've seen her take advantage of that on many occasions.
Yeah, her foreign travel has always been the subject of controversy, whether it was going overseas to sister cities or whether it was just leaving the state even to go to places like mayor's conferences as well.
Right, and you know, we'll wait to hear from David Hammer and Amelia at the courthouse. It very well could have been that the nature of these charges involve the mayor and her then police bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappy, allegedly committing wire fraud, collecting money, in his case, for hours not spent doing police duties, but in fact carrying on an alleged romantic relationship on some trips that included travel. So that might have been some of the reasoning behind a somewhat more restrictive bond. The forfeiting of a passport, usually you see that in cases where there's a potential flight risk. I don't think that, this is a defendant who's going to be skipping court and going on the lam.
Well, let's talk about Jeffrey Vappy here. Now, Jeffrey Vappy was initially supposed to be arraigned today as well. That's been moved to Friday. Anything suspicious on that?
Nothing at all. I talked to both the Cantrell team as well as the Vappy team, and they indicated that this was merely just for scheduling purposes. There was a conflict with one of the Vappy attorneys, so they just asked and got granted moving this to Friday morning. And so they're still in this indictment together as co-defendants. He will simply have his, in this case, a rearraignment because remember, this is a superseding indictment. He had been indicted back last year, just himself as a defendant, and now the mayor has been added to that in a superseding indictment. So he still has to come into court and answer to his new charges. Yeah,
let's go ahead and run this through. We've seen a timeline that you've created where there's been controversy in regards to public spending and the spending of public money since October of 2017. This is before Cantrell had even become mayor, when she was just on the council, right?
That's right, and there were questions about her use of a city council credit card allegedly for personal expenses, and an investigation of that led to her paying back some of that. She at the time claimed
about $9,000 nearly.
It wasn't, not intentional, that it was just kind of sloppy bookkeeping on her part. She did pay that back, but even after that term as council member gets elected mayor, she has continued to be dogged by questions, and perhaps at the forefront, one of the first big controversies that really began with her second term was travel.
Yes.
Travel abroad and upgrading to first class, which is prohibited under the city charter unless you pay for that first class upgrade out of your own pocket. She billed taxpayers for that.
Yeah.
And you recall, in the end, she had to pay that money back for the first class upgrades, even after she initially was very defiant, saying she was not going to pay that back.
Defiancy seems to be a theme here, not necessarily taking accountability, making sure that she steps back, or even rather doubles down on what exactly she's doing. She did end up paying $29,000 back to the city, but that was only because of the CAO at the time, Gilbert Montano.
That's right, and the CAO, he looked at the city charter, and it was his formal and official ruling that there just is no wiggle room to cover that, even though initially Cantrell said she needed to upgrade for security reasons, and the law did not leave her any sort of wiggle room. She did have to pay that money back. But we've seen this in other instances, and one of the examples, and it is even woven into this 44-page indictment against Cantrell and Vappy, is the use of the Pontalba apartment, in which she was found to be using it as almost like a second residence and having overnight stays. The council cracked down, but compromised initially and said, okay, we're not going to take the apartment away completely, but no overnight stays. What did the mayor do? Overnight stays, and now that Pontalba apartment is completely taken away.
Yeah, so okay, we have a lot more to talk about, including a new suit that was filed actually today, if you can believe that. We don't know if the timing is significant or not, but I want to go to Amelia Strahan. She is live for us outside of the courthouse, the Federal District Court. Amelia, tell me a little bit more about her demeanor, what happened inside of the courtroom, and what we can expect to move forward.
Yeah, Charisse. So Mayor Cantrell entered federal court today with her head held high. And like you guys mentioned, she pleaded not guilty to all 11 counts. Now, her charges include conspiracy to obstruct justice, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and false declaration before a grand jury. Now, almost all of these charges are tied to her alleged affair with former bodyguard Jeffrey Vappy. Now, the indictment alleges the two spent tens of thousands of dollars on international and national travel, all on the city's dime. As we know, Vappy is being arraigned next Friday, separate from the mayor due to some scheduling conflicts. And if found guilty of all of the charges, Cantrell could spend decades in prison. She was released with some terms and conditions. Now, those included submitting her passport, any international travel must seek approval, travel restricted to Eastern District of Louisiana, and no contact with her co-defendant without an attorney present. Now, our investigative reporter David Hammer is still in that room. Again, it's still going on. We just ran out, but 11 counts. She pleaded not guilty to all 11. Sharice?
Amelia, those not guilty pleas are what expected. Of course, as Mike Pearlstein just mentions, that she has to plead those 11 not guilty counts. But you've even reported on this before. Her international travel and her national travel have been subject of controversy here. So, of course, that passport surrendering and having to ask for any approval to get some national travel is something that is significant, especially for someone who is still a sitting mayor.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we know from that indictment, it alleges that the mayor and her former bodyguard went to several locations like Napa Valley, Martha's Vineyard, and much of those trips were funded by city dollars, that indictment alleges. So it has been a point of contention between the mayor and the city council. Now, she is allowed to have communication with the city council when it comes to matters of the city because she is still the mayor. But she is not allowed to discuss the case with the city council, according to what we heard today. That was part of the conditions of her release.
Okay, any other, you said that she had her head held high. We know that the mayor has been a person that does not back down. Did you notice anything significant about the way she spoke or the way that she carried herself today?
Yeah, I will say it was not the arrogance or perhaps overconfidence that we have seen in the past. She was respectful with her responses, very calm demeanor, and calm is probably a better word to use, but I would also say confident when she walked in the room, did not seem to have any nerves, any fear, which is, that is on par with what we usually see from Mayor Cantrell. But at least I did not sense any arrogance when she walked in. Very respectful to everyone in the room.
I know that we have a long way to go on this one. Amelia, can you stand by for me for a second? Because I do want to definitely talk about some of that defiance that we were saying, and also the impact that this could have, Mike Pearlstein, on city operations. They've already said HUD funding, that she can't touch anything with federal dollars, neither can Jeffrey Vappy. But was she doing that in the first place?
Well, given the fact that she has 3 more months left in her term, I don't anticipate there's going to be much change in the operations of the city. She, even in the case of the HUD contracts, Housing and Urban Development, which is federal, she says, and the administration says, that most of those contracts are signed by the CAO and not the mayor. So it doesn't look like her personal signature would be needed to, carry on the work, in this case of Hannah, which receives, HUD financing.
Yeah.
Other areas still yet to be seen. I think the most significant takeaway here is the restriction of travel. It does sound like when you surrender a passport, that means no foreign travel.
Right.
That means she is not crossing any borders, and who knows what international trips might have been on the calendar in these remaining 3 months of her term. She certainly has traveled frequently. Now, out-of-state travel, in fact, beyond just the Eastern District of Louisiana. And Eastern District doesn't even include Baton Rouge.
Right.
There's routine business in Baton Rouge, maybe other parts of the state, for which she has to get express permission from pretrial services to go on those trips. And for a mayor who obviously travels frequently, that is a fairly restrictive measure as a condition of this bond. And we'll have to ask the attorneys what they think. But it seems like because the indictment itself revolves around travel and alleged misuse of taxpayer dollars regarding travel, that is probably one of the reasons behind that restriction.
It's much more significant. And at one point, there was a contentious battle between city council and the mayor in trying to restrict her travel, especially with all of the issues that the city of New Orleans is facing. Now, we're adding insult to injury here today. The former head of New Orleans Office of Workforce Development, that's Sune Villavaso, She filed a federal lawsuit against the city alleging that she was fired after reporting payroll fraud and the misuse of federal relief funds within Mayor LaToya Cantrell's administration. So we have this lawsuit that just came down right here just today. So we don't necessarily know, obviously, just to clear this up, this is not in connection to today's indictment.
No, this is completely separate, but obviously this is not good news for what we can safely call an embattled mayor. Now facing an 11-count federal indictment. Here is a separate, you could term it as a whistleblower lawsuit. I believe our colleague, Chief Investigator David Hammer, was the first to break this story before this lawsuit was ever filed, wrongful termination claims, and now we see it in the form of a federal civil lawsuit.
Right. All right. So, I mean, she has a lot that's ahead of her, and still, again, 3 months left as mayor of the city of New Orleans, and obviously October 14th, there will be another mayor that is taking her place. Because of all of the history of controversies, we've seen some changes in how mayorship will be handled in the city of New Orleans. For instance, you talked about the Puntaba not necessarily going to the mayor anymore. What other changes are we seeing moving forward so that these alleged abuses don't happen anymore?
Well, you know, it's been kind of a mixed bag. The council did take away the Puntaba from use by not just this mayor, but any future mayor. And, you know, now everyone's out of the Puntaba while they do some renovations to the roof there. But on the travel, remember the council tried not once, but twice to restrict mayoral travel. That was under the guise of a declared budget crisis by the administration and Mayor Cantrell. And that ultimately went to court, and the council lost. And the restrictions that they tried to impose, not just on the mayor but other city employees, that was shot down in court. So that remains for once again, whoever's next in the mayor's office.
Right, so they have to take on some of these things, and we're getting a look right now. This was, actually, I believe that this is live right now. We're seeing everybody run in the same direction because, if I'm not mistaken, Mayor Cantrell was seen leaving the courthouse. Obviously swarmed by media. We haven't seen her just yet. The attorneys have left the courthouse, rather. Let's go through some of the summary of the indictment. They're jointly charged: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to obstruct justice, 6 counts of wire fraud. This one is just Cantrell. 1 count of obstruction of justice and 2 counts of making false declarations before a grand jury, while also Vappy faces 12 counts, additional counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of making a false statement to the FBI. How are we thinking about what these counts will lead to? We heard Amelia Strahan say a little bit earlier that there could be some potential jail time. Do you think that is a possibility for either of these 2?
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt that these charges, if everyone here, let's just say, hypothetically, is convicted as charged, these absolutely carry under federal sentencing guidelines prison time. And the prison time it's a detailed calculation based on the dollar amount involved, the charges, in the conviction. And 2 of the most serious are conspiracy. That didn't exist in the first indictment, which was just Jeffrey Vappy. He had 8 counts, 7 were wire fraud for fudging timesheets, claiming he was doing police duties when he was allegedly carrying on a personal relationship with the mayor. 1 count of lying to the FBI, which is max 6 months. So he wasn't, and the dollar amount on the alleged fraud there was, I think, $7,200. So it was not a substantial amount that would have been a big threat of serious prison time. However, now they've upped the dollar amount to more than $70,000 that the government claims was defrauded from the city of New Orleans for Vappy's travel. The counts on the mayor, and this is an interesting, legal point, but it could actually change the sentencing guidelines for her. The counts on her are aiding and abetting. Aiding and abetting Vappy's alleged wire fraud. The 2 most serious charges are conspiracy. Number 1, conspiracy to commit the fraud, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Those can carry up to 20 years, depending on the underlying offenses. So, no, this is a very serious set of federal felony allegations. And you could even see from the demeanor of the mayor I think, called the magistrate judge, Your Honor. This is being taken with utmost seriousness, as it should be.
As it should be. All right, Mike, just 1 second. We want to go back out on the field to Chief Investigator David Hammer. He was inside of the courtroom when the mayor made that not guilty plea to all 11 counts. Also, David, you and Mike have been covering this from the very beginning. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we expect to happen today?
Yeah, Charisse, I mean, Mike makes a really good point here. This is extremely serious, and the mayor showed it when I was walking in, asking her questions as she was walking in through a phalanx of reporters. She was extremely serious. She didn't say anything, but she was not smiling or anything like that. She wasn't her usual kind of gregarious, engaging personality. And he, she stood there in the court and was very, formal and said that she pleads not guilty to all counts. And to the point that Mike was making about how serious these charges are, they ran down the possible jail time, prison time for each of these charges if she's convicted, a maximum of 5 years on the first count, 20-year maximum on several other charges, and another 5 years maximum on the last 2 charges out of the 11 that she's facing. So these could be serious prison time. And, she was very succinct, saying, yes, I understand. And the other big thing that comes out of this is that she's facing some restrictions on her movement. She has had to give in her passport, turn over her passport. She can travel only inside the Eastern District of Louisiana unless she goes to the continental United States, in which case she would need approval from the U.S. Probation Office ahead of time. So these are some serious restrictions, but she is released on her own recognizance, no bond necessary. Now, I want to bring in Matt Chester. He's a defense attorney, and he is a former federal prosecutor who actually prosecuted the last time that a mayor of New Orleans was charged and convicted, former Mayor Ray Nagin. Now, Matt, we talked when she was actually initially indicted about how serious these charges are, but they are all tied to her alleged affair with her bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappy. There's been comments made by, including the former mayor of New Orleans, Ray Nagin, who you prosecuted, that this is just about an affair. He didn't know that a love affair was a federal crime. What can you say about what the real substance of these charges are?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit too simplistic of a explanation, I think, of the indictment. I mean, certainly at its core, there's an affair here that's being alleged by the grand jury, but there is a lot of conduct above and beyond the affair. There is allegations of giving false statements to the FBI. There's allegations of submitting false affidavits to a grand jury. And of course, the government here has tied the affair to monies that were paid out by the city for Officer Vappy's protection. So a little too simplistic to say this is just about affair. Certainly that's a big part of it, but it's really more about the process. The government would say this is more about the processes that these defendants undertook to hide that affair, which themselves are alleged violations of the law.
And, I was talking about the historic nature of this. I mean, to see a sitting mayor of New Orleans make that walk, what they call the walk of shame, across the street from her defense attorney's office across Poydras Street into a federal courtroom to face these kinds of charges is significant because we've never seen that before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a political analyst, but obviously, we're 20 years past Katrina. We like to say we're kind of open for business and wanting to move forward. Not a good look for the city to have a mayor indicted, regardless of the outcome of this case. Just not a great look for the city.
And what about the significance of the potential penalties if she were found guilty for each of these counts? I mean, there's 11 counts here. Some of them carry 20 years maximum. And of course, the sentencing guidelines are interesting because they're usually tied to money, that there's a ranking given to how much time you get based on how much money is involved. And this indictment talks about $70,000 in city money that went to pay for Jeffrey Vappy, the bodyguard's travel. But there's nothing about the mayor specifically getting a financial benefit from this. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's a complicated question. There isn't anything about the mayor getting a financial benefit. What's alleged is that the two undertook actions to have Officer Vappy be the protective detail when, according to the grand jury, it wasn't needed. That cost taxpayer dollars. But to your first question about sentencing, it's a very complicated procedure in federal court. Today was the first step in the process for the mayor, and so there were maximum penalties that were read, but almost invariably a first-time offender, even if she is convicted in a case like this, is going to get nowhere near the maximum penalties. As we talked about in the first day this was indicted, sentencing is driven by the sentencing guidelines, so she's looking at a much lower penalty even if she's convicted, but they're obviously felony counts. Jail time is a possibility, so these are nonetheless serious.
Yeah, we're getting way ahead of ourselves talking about penalties, but ironically, that's the first thing that you hear when they read these charges, and actually they don't actually read the charges because her defense attorney, Eddie Castang, waived the reading of the charges, but then they talk about what are the potential penalties here. But first, you've got to put on a case. We need to have an exchange of information here between the two parties. There's a long, long, long way to go here.
That's right. So what happened today is the first step in a process. Every criminal defendant anywhere in the country, in any state, goes through this. It was an initial appearance. It's what we call an arraignment and a detention hearing. The charges were, the reading of the charges, as you mentioned, were waived. You already talked about her getting a bond. And the maximum penalties are read just so the defendant is put on notice of the serious nature of these charges, but every defendant gets this. It is just the start of the criminal justice process, and we have a long way to go.
One of the things I asked her about as she was walking in was about the deletion of WhatsApp encrypted messages between her and Vappy. I believe it was 7,000 that are mentioned in the indictment, certainly thousands, I can't remember the exact number. But this goes to the point of her making statements, allegedly, to the grand jury that were false. The allegation that she first signed an affidavit in 2023 and then was called back to the grand jury in 2024 and repeated that she had turned over all of these records that were requested by the investigating federal grand jury. Are those the most serious charges that she's facing here? Would this be a case if it weren't for the fact that she's allegedly lied under oath?
Hard for me to answer that last one. It certainly makes it a more serious case that she lied under oath to the grand jury, allegedly lied under oath to the grand jury through in-person testimony and an affidavit. I think, from a defense standpoint, those are going to be the toughest charges to defend. You might have some arguments as to Officer Vappy's timesheets, whether she knew about them, whether she was in the chain of approval, how much she knew about them. I mean, if you're her lawyer, those are the sort of things you're going to be diving into as this case moves forward. But as it relates to actually turning over what was required to be turned over from the grand jury subpoena, the allegation here is that she deleted that information and then lied about it on multiple occasions. Those are tough charges to defend, and that's going to be an uphill battle.
Well, and the other new thing that we're hearing is that there are some restrictions on her in terms of who she can speak with and who she can communicate with about the nature of the case. It was mentioned by the prosecutor, Jordan Ginsburg, that there are witnesses who could be involved in this case that she should be restricted from contacting, but that the restrictions don't extend to her attorney, her defense attorney, Eddie Castang. But Judge Roby said that she should be allowed to continue to talk to employees at City Hall as long as it's not about the case. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of a catch-22, right? She's still the mayor. She still has a job to do. She still has to talk to city employees. But in a typical criminal case, defendants are barred from contacting victims, contacting witnesses, placing undue pressure or intimidating witnesses. So, I think the judge here is trying to strike a balance, right? How are we going to allow her to continue to do her job while not interfering improperly with this case? And that's the balance they struck, right? We will allow her to talk to city employees about city business, but as it relates to this case, it's got to be through counsel.
Now, another thing that you and I talked about is that she was allegedly made aware by associates that what she was allegedly doing with Jeffrey Vappy was illegal, and was warned about it by people saying, hey, the mayor of Nashville was doing something similar with her bodyguard, and she was forced to plead guilty and charged criminally. Is that significant? Why is it significant that she would have acknowledged knowledge of this before the charges were filed?
So I think in any white-collar case, usually a lot of the issues come down to what was in the defendant's head at the time they were undertaking the alleged wrongful conduct, right? A lot of defendants will plead, I didn't understand this was a crime, I didn't understand this was a felony, I didn't act with the requisite state of mind. So when the government has evidence, contemporaneous evidence of text messages pointing out the fact that this is a crime, and the defendant kind of deflects those or misdirects those or says, don't accuse me of things.
And allegedly continues in the conduct, right?
Right. That is, the government would say that's consciousness of wrongdoing. And so that's powerful evidence for the government.
Yeah. Now, we can go back to you now in the studio. This is obviously a major day, and I think we're still waiting for Mayor Cantrell to come out. Yeah, she's out now.
No, I believe that her attorney, we're getting a live look right now, David. Thank you for that. His attorney is out. Let's try to listen to what they're saying here. It looks like he's answering questions.
November 17th. Is that Ron? You're asking that question?
Yeah. I mean, that's a rather short time frame, isn't it?
No, that's not realistic. That's in accordance with the Speedy Trial Act, and it's not realistic.
So when do you think the trial will go forward then?
No idea. It's up to the judge.
What will happen between now and
Y'all are
that
making
trial?
me say stuff when I wasn't going to say anything.
She faces quite a bit of jail time. I mean, how confident are you that you could keep her out of prison?
Oh, look, we're not talking about the case. I told you that.
How is she holding up through all this?
Oh, well, she looked good today, don't she think?
She did
Do you
seem.
believe this is just about her affair or about alleged affair?
I'm not talking about the case.
What are people?
She did appear to be cool, calm, collected today. Tell us about her mental state.
I'm not going to talk about her or the case.
Okay. How does she feel about the travel restrictions imposed against her?
There really weren't any restrictions.
Eddie, does she have anything she wants to say to the people who elect her?
Not at this time. Upon advice of counsel, not at this time.
Is there anything she wants people to know that they're missing right now? No, you don't have to tell.
She's making no statements at this time, either through me or personally.
Will the restrictions on her contact with others have any impact on her ability to run the city?
No.
Why do you say that?
Well, because the restriction was she could continue to work with city employees. She just couldn't talk about the case. So that's not going to impede any of the city operations. So it's business as usual.
You don't see this as being a distraction?
Can she talk about the case with Vappy, Eddie? Can she talk about the case with Vappy?
No, whatever the order says, that's the rules. That's what she's going to follow.
Her messages to the city.
No statements. She's not making any statements.
All right.
Watch out for her.
All right. So again,
Don't anybody call me.
all right. So.
All right, so you were
That is
just taking a
attorney
live
for
look at-
Mayor LaToya Cantrell, Eddie Castaigne, giving us an update, really not really giving an update, not talking about the case, saying that repeatedly. But I know that one of the things that David talks about, and I'll bring Investigator Mike Pearlstein back here with me, restrictions on who she can talk to. And everyone asks, how is it she conducts city business if there are some restrictions? According to what he just said, these restrictions are only relative to talking about the case with anyone within the city. Is that correct?
Correct, and that should allow her to continue doing the job as mayor, dealing with city department heads and employees, as long as she doesn't talk about the case, which I doubt she's doing. However, I didn't get a clear answer on whether the restrictions apply to communications with witnesses, potential witnesses, and even in co-defendants, in this case, Jeffrey Vappy. You know, there's still obviously speculation about the nature of their relationship. It's alleged that this was an affair, and who knows what the current status of that relationship is. But not being able to communicate with Vappy except through their respective attorneys could be significant. Who knows what sort of contact they have, but generally speaking, a defendant in a case like this is restricted from talking about the case to other co-defendants and or witnesses. So,
and this is typical though in these situations.
Almost uniformly that is applied. And there's always the ability to communicate, you know, through your defense counsel, and that's necessary, obviously, to build a defense. But the question of her contacts, her continued contacts with her co-defendant, Jeffrey Vappy, I think we maybe need to get a clear answer on just what this conditions imply as far as that communication.
Yeah, Amelia Strahan and David Ham are still out there outside of the federal courthouse trying to get more answers, waiting to stand by to see if Mayor LaToya Cantrell will walk outside of the courthouse. Some final thoughts here. What are our next steps?
Well, now we begin the pretrial phases of this. It begins with discovery by the defense attorneys. This is obviously the first appearance by the mayor. The Jeffrey Vappy indictment was some time ago, so there's actually been a lot of discovery, and because of the overlapping nature of the charges, I do believe that there's been quite a bit of discovery. So you look for motions by defense attorneys if they want to, try to throw out any of the evidence, suppress any of the evidence, before you start to actually see, a hard calendar. Yes, there might be dates set for, pre-trial conference and eventually a trial date in federal court. In complicated cases like this especially, those almost never hold up. There's always, legal twists and turns that you can't predict at the very front end of a case.
Yes or no answer here. Do we think that this is going to play out while she's still in office?
Absolutely not. She will be long gone from office. Any sort of resolution. Now, of course, at this stage, either of these defendants could plead guilty at any time. And in fact, the federal government, they're duty bound to, explore the potential of a plea deal. This is a little bit unlike state charges, where the federal government is always open for, let's say, let's make a deal, which means a tremendous reduction in charges if someone's willing to accept responsibility. Now, there's been no signal whatsoever, and I can just tell you that from what I've heard from the two camps, that's not on the radar. But being a federal prosecution, that's going to happen, and we certainly, just need to be watchful if anything happens along those lines. But I would expect this is going to follow the normal course of any federal prosecution, with motions, pre-trial, before we actually get a firm trial date.
All right, Mike Perlstein, thank you so much for your analysis on this. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell pleading not guilty in a federal case against her. We will continue to cover this story on our website, WWLTV.com, right here, WWL Plus, and on 5, 6, and 10 at WWL Louisiana. Make sure you watch us on television as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sharice Gibson. We'll have all the updates coming up in just a couple of hours.
This has been breaking news from WWL Louisiana.
Thank you.